What should business leaders and investors be doing today to prepare for this evolving cyber risk landscape?
On the ground floor, as like a startup, way more inexpensive to get your cybersecurity and data governance in place when you're small than when you're large.
That's how things have always been done. And I don't think that's the case.
Oh yeah, that's how we've always done things. I
don't think that really works in the 21st century.
It doesn't.
Hey, welcome to Amplify AI Partners, the podcast where we deep dive into the intersection of AI, cybersecurity, and business transformation. I'm your host, Hamza Malik. So today we're exploring a critical issue that's reshaping both how businesses think about cybersecurity as well as their investments, which is the hidden cost of data breaches. While most companies focus on the immediate damage, things like regulatory fines, system recovery, or customer notifications, there's a much larger story brewing beneath the surface, and we're going to focus a little bit on the M&A landscape today. So our guest today brings a unique perspective to this conversation. Steve Long operates at the intersection of cybersecurity and deal making, where he's witnessing firsthand how cyber incidents are fundamentally changing, M&A dynamics. So, Steve, I want to welcome to the show. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, maybe your background, and a little bit about Unravl as well?
Sure. My name's Steve Long. I'm the Chief Risk Officer here at Unravl Technologies. We're a cybersecurity consulting firm, mostly on the CISA programmatic side. I was recently a cybersecurity advisor with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Homeland Security's cyber agency, CISA, where we were responsible for securing critical infrastructure for both cyber and physical threats. Before that, I bounced around the intelligence community a lot for quite a number of years. So I've been doing this for a couple decades now. Really how Unravl started is when me and my partner, Joe Flores, our CEO, he was my counterpart up in Boston. And after doing this for years with the federal government, talking to small businesses, smaller critical infrastructure owner operators, all the way up into the Fortune 100 companies, right? We could see where the gaps really lie. And we created Unravl to address those gaps.
Thank you, Steve. So let's get into kind of the meat of the discussion here, starting with the big picture. So when we talk about the hidden costs of data breaches, what are we really talking about beyond, the headline numbers that we might see in the news?
So, I really want to start with there, how inexpensive it is for those attackers to do these data breaches, right? So when we start, you can get a whole ransomware starter kit on the dark web for roughly $700. The ransomware as a service tools are roughly available as a subscription service for $100, and phishing kits for $50, and then a cookie grabber for $400. It's actually getting really inexpensive for threat actors to conduct their attacks. Ransomware as a service is just like any other SaaS, right? It's a service-based subscription that unsophisticated threat actors pay these guys to carry out their attacks. Now, as far as the cost go, there's a lot. There's the hidden cost, which is the cost to your reputation, the remediation cost, the loss of data. You're going to have to provide, if your PII was spilled, you're going to have to provide at least a year's worth of data monitoring, like something like LifeLock for an entire year after that breach. And if it's HIPAA data and you have a HIPAA breach, now you have fines that are coming into place where the Department of HHS will come and they'll fine you. The OCE will come and fine you. And those fines can go, we've seen them anywhere from $5,000 all the way up to $500,000, depending on the breach. And when people see those breaches, what they don't understand is, with HIPAA, right? It's not just a breach. They got in and stole a bunch of stuff. That's just not one violation. Every single record they steal is a separate violation under HIPAA. So you get fined for each individual record that's stolen. Really crazy. Other things are immediate financial impact would be like downtime cost, business continuity and disaster recovery expenses. Like if they actually brick your system and you can't get it back, you may have to buy new server, new hardware, even if you have images to put to re-image on those, depending how bad it could be. If it's really bad and you have an incident response team activation and you don't have cyber insurance, you're going to be out of pocket for that, and that's going to cost north of 50 grand just for starters.
I said, it sounds like a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is. And then there's the legal complications where you're going to have to pay an attorney, right, for third-party legal counsel, your board investor and investor relations. If you have investors, right, they're going to throw the big, WTF, what's happening to our investment, and then any sort of media relations is going to come into play, and then you just have your regular operational costs, which are going to be employees are going to have to work overtime for emergency staffing to get you guys back up. External consulting fees. You're going to have to bring, if you don't have somebody on retainer like me, you're going to have to find somebody. And if you're not on retainer, it's a lot more expensive. And then emergency technology procurement. We really say it's better to be prepared. It's not if you get hit, it's when you get hit now. And how prepared are you to weather the storm? That's really where you should be thinking. And cyber should no longer be, it's not an IT problem. It's a business problem, right? It should be, cybersecurity requirements should be included in your business requirements.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, as part of your business model.
I would definitely agree with that last statement. I'm actually pretty surprised how inexpensive some of this, I got a kick out of ransomware as a service. Sounds like maybe some disgruntled, big tech employee might have been laid off. There's been a ton of those, and then found a side hustle. Really shocked. $50, $700 even. That's to do big damage. That's kind of crazy. Also, your point on even the hit to the brand. I'm speaking as a consumer here. There are a couple companies that I just completely steer away from because of their data breaches, the number of data breaches they've had in past years. And, I don't want to name names, but there are a couple banks that I just would not bank with. But it feels like, anybody at any time can be at risk for these things.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody. And there's always the 0-day attack. So you can be as secure, technically secure as you think you can be, but there's always a 0-day, something that no one's ever seen before. And that's really where your policies, where we come into play, is your incident response planning, your policy management. Do you have insurance? Are we doing all the right things to have cyber liability insurance? Because even if you do have cyber liability insurance, people tend to, like with any insurance policy, right, whether it's E&O or general liability, they just check yes to everything on their little attestation form that you're doing everything you're supposed to do. So when you have cyber insurance and you have an incident and you activate your cyber insurance, they bring that remediation team in. Their purpose is actually twofold. One, they're looking to stop the bleeding, but two, they're looking to see if, hey, did you do everything you said you were doing on that attestation form? If not, you're negligent. We're not paying.
So,
or they will pay and then they'll drop you.
So let's say there is, a hypothetical company that has had a couple cyber incidents in its past, right? In the past 3 to 5 years. Now, if we look at this from a M&A deal-making perspective, are the valuations of companies getting impacted by their prior cyber incidents? Do you have any kind of stats on this or any kind of quantifiable?
So if you look at like Yahoo after their big breach when they sold, off the top of my head, I think it was almost a $300 million hit when Yahoo sold after their breach. It can really affect because they want to assess their risk, right? It's just like any investment, right? Unfortunately, cybersecurity is now part of that risk equation. That's why what we on our M&A platform, it's twofold, right? We want to protect the company that's selling, right, and make sure they're doing all the real things, but also the buyers also can do their own due diligence to make sure that you're doing everything you're supposed to do. And if not, they want to know what they're getting into. And if you guys are kind of a mess cyber wise, that could affect the offer because that's more money they're going to have to dump in, get you to where
Naturally,
they
yeah,
need you to be cyber.
yeah.
And it depends how long. These could be very large capital expenses, depending on the size, right? Like so, for the technical stuff, the cost is usually by endpoint and by user, right? So if you have a lot of endpoints, a lot of servers, a lot of employees, like those costs goes up. They can run in the 150 to 250 a user or endpoint cost. Now you got a company that it's got 1,000 users or 1,000 employees, right? That's $250,000 a month. That's $3 million a year. They're going to have to you know sink into this on just technical, just on endpoint
That
and
is,
cyber solutions.
those are kind of bonkers numbers, honestly. Um,
Yeah, so that's kind of an inflated number. That includes, so that's where you should be at 150 to 250 for all of your cyber stuff, not just the technical solutions. So that's spread across your SOC services, your policies, any sort of exercises you do, and yes, you should be exercising your incident response plan annually. If you don't have one, you need to have one. Love to help everybody out with that, because that's really our bread and butter. Is what we do is really what we do is that's part of our vCISO services, and that's really our bread and butter coming from CISA is really helping organizations start. You would be surprised how large organizations out there do not have robust cyber security apparatus in their. It's usually the last thing organizations think about. And unfortunately, I've been to several big companies that like their cyber security consisted of like two guys, and they were like a $1.6 billion a year revenue company,
right.
right? So
They're they're
it's
they're
it's
probably run by people who have, I'm sure been working for decades, probably longer than, since I was born. But even I've noticed, in my 8 years of experience in management consulting, a lot of big companies, F500s, F100s, are run with this, paradigm of thought of just that's how things have always been done. And I don't think that's the
yes.
case.
Oh yeah, that's how we've always done things. That's
Yeah.
the
And
that's
that
the
I don't think that really
oh
works in the 21st century.
it doesn't. It doesn't. And cyber's changing now with AI, right? Back in the day, you used to get these phishing emails, right? And they were the Nigerian prince, right? And they were all misspelled and like the English wasn't great. And now like
They're
the
pretty
emails
good.
themselves are written very well.
They're pretty good. I mean, I used to, maybe not, a large scale thing, but I used to tell my mom, she would look at something on Facebook and be like, "Hey, look at this," and I'd be like, "Mom, you're spending too much time online on Facebook. It's fake." Now sometimes I'm even going to my friends and I'm like, "Is this real or is this fake?" Like I can't even
Yeah.
really tell
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. It's really it's crazy how well AI has created this environment where we can just fake anything.
And honestly, like I'm really impressed by, slightly off topic, but I'm really impressed by some of these video outputs, things like
Yes,
VO3 and stuff. I saw on Twitter just yesterday. There's a whole 2 minute trailer for a movie that doesn't exist, and it looked
I
better than
know.
any Star Wars movie of, at least since Episode 3.
Yeah.
But just to kind of get back on topic here, one other thing I wanted to ask you, right? I come from a go-to-market background within management consulting. I've done plenty of due diligences, really like burning the midnight oil type of thing for 2 3 weeks. But I wanted to ask you from that, cybersecurity and M&A perspective, how has due diligence evolved to account for this kind of cybersecurity risk management, and what are acquirers looking for now that they might not have been even 5 years ago.
Well, so it went from absolutely nothing 5 years ago, right? It wasn't even part of the equation to now. It's not all private equity and M&A type firms. It's becoming more and more prevalent. They're looking at things like, your typical frameworks, your ISO 27001, right? That's your management framework for cybersecurity. Do you have all those things in place? They're looking at things like SOC 2, depending on what type of other activities you have going on, or your PCI DSS. Are you HIPAA compliant with the HIPAA security rules if you're using HIPAA data? If you're international, are we GBDR, which that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah.
And really, there's a ton of frameworks out there. It's dependent upon where you do business, who you're doing business with, what type of business you're in.
Yeah, I mean, that
Other
makes
ones
sense.
we've seen that are coming more online are NIST CSF and CIS, the CIS 18. Those are less common. More, it's the ISO, which is an international standard,
Hmm.
and HIPAA, which is a regulation, GBDR, which is a regulation. It comes in more legalese, the,
Right.
the, the legal framework forms.
It's the common consultant answer. It depends.
Yeah, it
Um,
does depend. It,
yeah,
it, it
yeah,
it depends. I'd love to say that there's those are the common themes, right? I'd love to say that you have to do these things, right? Like, I mean, SOC 2's out there too. Um, a lot of a lot of companies are requiring SOC 2's now just to do business with them, right? If they want to see that, there's a bunch out there.
yeah, and that's the thing. I think more and more in our times, things are not one size fits all solution. A lot of things are case by case, and a lot of things can't be commoditized.
It yes, exactly.
So now I want to touch on a slightly different angle here, and I'm particularly interested in your background with CISA and in the intelligence community, right? So let's talk a little geopolitic dimension.
Okay.
So, we've got rising tensions all around the world between major powers and regional powers. We've got, this big threat of, even China taking U.S. IP through corporate espionage, right? And we've seen them get through some of those barriers, right? DeepSeek being, one of the biggest and brightest examples. So, how are these kind of nation state cyber threats affecting the whole landscape, at least in the commercial realm?
It's kind of a little bit sector dependent. Like, China by far is in the commercial realm is the biggest threat. They love sucking up IP and getting it any way they can. The big nation state are the typhoons, right? We got Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon. They're camping out and sucking up data. Um, like, if you look at what they've done in the communications sector with the communications, and part of it is there to suck up IP. The other part is they're camping out in case of conflict with the United States, where they can disrupt the United States both through both critical infrastructure and economically is what they're looking to do. It's a lot of it is pre-positioning
Hmm.
in case of a conflict with the United States. You find them a lot in the DIB sector, the defense industrial base companies, and you find them pretty far down in the supply chain. It's not just the Lockheeds or the Boeings. They actually have pretty good cybersecurity. It's the supplier of the supplier, right? Of the third tier supplier, where maybe even fourth tier down, where you'll find them. That's why CMMC 2.0 is becoming really, really important. If you're in the DIB sector, you're going to have to be at least level one, which is a self-attestation. It's 17 controls from 800, 171, and then there's level two, which is well over 100 controls, and it's a bear. But because of things like China and Russia, Russia's really gone after the electric grid. We have not seen it much in the United States, but we've seen it in Ukraine and some other
Hmm.
places where Russia's gone after the electric grid. North Korea is mostly they're there for the cash grab. They're mostly ransomware actors, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
I remember with Sony, right? That movie.
Yeah.
with James Franco a while ago.
Yep.
I forgot what it was called.
They fund a large portion of their national budget through ransomware at this point. I mean, we have the other nation states that, and then we have the criminal actors too that are out there to make money. Like you look at things like with the change.org, the healthcare, like that was rough in the United Healthcare. What happened with that is the attackers, they used Black Hat ransomware, and there's no honor among thieves. They pretty much stole the ransom, the $22 million ransom that they paid. But that changed healthcare. That took down a lot of pharmacies. Nobody was able to get medicine in for a while, at least a week. There was a lot of pharmacies down.
Yeah, that's big, and that's big. And what about that? You remember a while ago there was a lot of flights that were shut down, but that I don't think that was a cyber.
Well, that was
incident.
CrowdStrike. That was the CrowdStrike one. That wasn't
CrowdStrike.
that
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 wasn't
wasn't
a
a
cyber incident, right?
that wasn't a cyber attack. That was literally Microsoft allowed CrowdStrike to operate at the kernel level of their operating system, and they set a bad push out for an update, and it shut down Microsoft computers across the globe.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny. I remember I think this was actually that day. I had a flight from Newark Airport and I was going to San Francisco for a work meeting in San Jose. And nobody was working at Newark Airport, right? It was all automated and nobody had any idea what to do. So everybody on the flights were like on the phone with customer service trying to get the kiosks to print our boarding passes and stuff like that. Or it wasn't even boarding passes because everyone has them on their phone. It was more like
Yeah.
booking us onto the next flights, right? I had
Yep.
to actually sleep. I missed my flight. I had to sleep at my brother's place, and I got there the next day. But it's funny because I saw online, I think it was Singapore, they didn't have almost any issues. They went straight pen and paper, and they started processing people, the old-fashioned way, and they were just getting people onto
Yeah.
flight. I thought that was really interesting. That sometimes we may over automate ourselves and then forget how to do
That,
basic
that
things.
is that is a problem, and that's a big problem. You see that in healthcare, right, with hospitals.
Hmm.
Um, they have, I don't know if you've been in a hospital recently, but on the floors they have these rolling carts, right, to do all the charting, right. We've had hospitals that have had major ransomware attack, national systems that have ransomware attacks, and one of the things that we recommend is that you have drills on paper charting, because you're going to have to, those nurses are going to have to remember how to chart paper with paper, because otherwise nobody's gonna there's
Yeah,
gonna be no record. Yeah.
and it makes a lot more sense now. I'm glad I went to school and graduated, pre AI.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, you know what I mean? Like, because now, like, all the students that I hear about are just like, obviously, they're going to use what's at their disposal so that either they do better or they can hang out more, right? That's kind of natural, especially at that age. But it makes a lot more sense now why my fifth grade teacher was like, no, you guys are going to memorize these times tables. No calculators allowed in my classroom. um,
Yeah. I mean, I have a 15-year-old, and it's like the amount of AI and tech they use. Like, I was like, you have no idea what it's like to go into a library, look up a book with the Dewey Decimal System,
Dewey
and
Decimal, yeah.
the old cards that we used to have, and go
Uh-huh.
find a book and then have to like photocopy it to do your research, right? Like,
Yeah, a bunch of
they have
sticky
everything at their
notes, like.
fingertips. Yeah.
And what's funny
Yeah.
is I think there's a certain generation, probably a millennial, right, where we got to grow up kind of on with both, right? Like, got to play outside, still came
Yes.
up with tech. I've seen this with my little sister. If my folks, my dad's in his 70s, right? Sometimes he's like, oh, the TV's not working, and it's really just an HDMI cable is loose, or you got to change the
Hmm.
input. And I've seen with my sister, and even just with some of the younger crowd, they're so digitally like software native that they don't even know like
Check the
HDMI
cables. Yeah.
versus that versus the input. Like everything's kind of just always been there, and I think that's also really interesting, and how that's going
Yeah.
to shape the future. I don't know.
And there's always those I have those fights with my 15-year-old that over math, right? I have a calculator on my phone, and to the teacher who told me you'll never have a calculator on you all the time. Well, okay, but
And
yeah,
people actually, sometimes I'll write stuff down. I like having a pen and paper. There is something to be said about like memorizing and understanding stuff in your brain when you do that. But people
yeah,
still comment to me if someone sees it, they're like, "Wow, you have like good handwriting," and it just goes to show like even the cursive in like second grade, third grade. Still comes into play. I don't know who really
yeah.
cares about that, but
Well, they don't even teach cursive anymore. So like my
yeah,
kids, like
yeah.
they, I was like, you need to be able to read cursive because most of historical documents are written in cursive. How are you going to be able to? People still need to know how to read cursive. You may not have to write it, but learn how to read it.
I kind of last point on this. So I was a history minor in school just because I loved history and current events. Towards the end, for those higher level classes, we would have to get into like primary research, which is like newspapers, diaries, and
Yes,
journals and things like that. And
primary sources.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I realized like people back in the day were so eloquent, even in their personal diaries and journals, because one of the only forms of entertainment was like reading books, and that too was just literature, right? You didn't have like 50 Shades and stuff.
Yeah.
so, so even the eloquence of like the average educated person was really astonishing, at least compared to today. But let's kind of get back here. I just want to kind of last question here, right? So looking ahead, what should business leaders and investors be doing today to prepare for this evolving cyber risk landscape?
On the ground floor, as like a startup, way more inexpensive to get your cybersecurity and data governance in place when you're small than when you're large, right? So those are the two things I would really uh, focus on. Get your cybersecurity in place, get your policies, plans, procedures, get a fractional CISO. They're fairly inexpensive. A vCISO. That way you have some sort of cybersecurity. You don't have to pay a full-time cybersecurity leadership, um, but get a fractional guy in there to provide some cybersecurity leadership and guidance for you. And then as far as the data governance, with AI coming, right, you need to make sure your data is properly governed. You have data management plans. You have proper data classifications, because that's what's going to keep AI from sucking your proprietary corporate data up into large LLMs like ChatGPT and the 100 other AI platforms out there, 300 something other AI platforms out there. Perplexity, all the ChatGPT. And if you are going to institute AI, make sure you roll it out correctly. CISA has some guides. There's now an ISO 42001, and there's also the NIST AI RMF. I do those things on the ground floor while you're still small because it's still relatively inexpensive to do before you become a giant and then have to go back. Oh crap, we've got 200 terabytes of data we have to go back and classify now, instead of just getting that process done when you have no data. So
Mm-hmm.
as it comes in, it's automated and
Mm-hmm.
done. So with AI, we've kind of thrown our nose at data governance and data loss prevention for years, and now with AI sucking up everybody's data, the chickens might be coming home to roost, right? Because we've avoided, because it's not easy. It's hard, but it's significantly cheaper to do on the ground floor than after you get big.
Right. And just one more time for our audience, who are the typical clients that you typically work with?
So we run the gamut. We've got uh, higher education, that we work with. We've got some commercial facilities sector companies that we work with, some healthcare that were involved. So, and it runs the gamut from large to small. We're even in the DIB semiconductor industry as well. We've got a client in that is in the semiconductor industry. So we're non-discriminatory because cyber is non-discriminatory.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, Steve, it's been an eye-opening conversation about how cybersecurity risks are reshaping the business landscape in ways that many leaders might not fully appreciate yet. And for our listeners, the key takeaway is clear: cybersecurity is not just an IT issue. It's a
It is not.
fundamental business and financial risk that's affecting everything, A to Z, all the way up to the company valuations. And if you want to connect with Steve or learn more about his work, you can find him either on LinkedIn or through unraveltech.ai. Any other closing comments, Steve?
Uh, it was a great time. Thanks for having me. I hope that this really sheds some light for those in the business world that cyber is a business requirement at this point, and it's no longer just an IT thing.
Well, thank you for tuning in to Amplify AI Partners. I'm Hamza Malik, and we'll see you next time.